It was a Friday night and there was no baseball on, and that doesn't feel right.
You are Locked On MLB, your daily MLB podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans, and welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully. Follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter or whatever they're calling it these days, and on Instagram. I'm at Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram, but the best way to get a hold of me is right here on the YouTube page. And when you leave a comment, make sure to leave that hashtag Everyday Sully. It helps us find the comments out there in all of the social media universe. Hey, today's episode is brought to you by our good friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today. And let's go to the trivia question. Question I had was in 1972, and you see right behind me right there, there's the program for the 1972 World Series. The A's won their first pennant since being the Philadelphia A's in 1931. In 1972, in one of the greatest, and probably the greatest postseason ever played, and one of the great thrilling do-or-die playoff games ever played, the A's clinched the pennant. The question I had was, what A's pitcher got the save to clinch the 1972 ALCS? So there you go. JRT Hughes, who's an everyday Sully, said Raleigh Fingers. Great guess, and he did close out the World Series, and he did close out the 1974 World Series, of which he was also the World Series MVP. He was their bullpen closer, Hall of Fame bullpen closer, but he didn't close out that year's ALCS. There's Gavin. Wait, where are you right now? Why is that coming up like that? There's a weird thing happening right now on my. It's coming up as a ticker. I don't want it to come up as a ticker. All right, let's go up here. I guess this is a new item here. Pressing buttons. Trivia cast by Gavin Lelouch. I can't even read it. It said trivia guess fingers would be too obvious, so I'm just going to guess Blue Moon Autumn, and just because you want me to say Blue Moon Autumn. And yes, that is not the correct answer. I guess if it's too long, it does a ticker. I've never seen that before. Anyway, no, it wasn't Blue Moon Autumn. That's easy for you to say. Mike O'Hare -790 Everyday Sully trivia guess Daryl Knowles. By the way, that is a fantastic guess. Do you know why? Because he was the pitcher who clinched the 1973 World Series. However, he was injured in 1972, which means they didn't have a left-handed specialist out of the bullpen, and it means Argonaut Comedy got it correct. It was Vida Blue. Vida Blue, who had won the Cy Young Award and the MVP the year before by all modern standards in 1972, had a phenomenal season, but by 1972 standards of how they handled pitchers, he had a subpar season. He had a big holdout at the beginning of the year, and he came out and became a big star out of the bullpen for the A's, and he pitched the final 4 innings in relief of Blue Moon Odom, who, if they gave out ALCS MVPs back then, Odom probably would have been the ALCS MVP, but it was Vida Blue who got the save. Okay, why wasn't there a game on Friday? Seriously, I understand there's travel schedules and everything like that, but come on, folks. You've got to be able to work this out. Here's my simple solution, shall we? We remove one of the travel days. We really make it so there's a sense of urgency to clinch the wild card series in 2 games. If I had my druthers, you would start the wild card series the Monday after the regular season ends. But I understand you have to leave that Monday open in case you have a situation like you had just last year, where you had to play the weird tiebreaker doubleheader between the Mets and Atlanta. I get that. I understand. So and there's probably some travel situation you're going to have to be able to do because, as we saw this year, you don't know really until the final pitch for where that wild card series is going to go. Okay, fine. You have that Monday open. You have Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday to play the wild card series, and after that Thursday, I'm sorry, you got to play the next day. Create an incentive. If you got to, if you're Yankees beating Boston, you're Detroit beating Cleveland, you're Chicago beating San Diego, if you're penalized for not winning it in two, you play on Thursday, Friday. Why? Not just because of the sense of, okay, you're going to be burning through your pitchers. If you're going to burn through your pitchers and you got to play that game right away. Also, Milwaukee, uh, Philadelphia, Seattle, and Toronto have been sitting around since Sunday, and that's kind of a penalty for them in a weird way. And why are we penalizing them for having the better records? I'm sorry. Penalize the teams for not having the better records, and you just got to play. There's a couple other reasons. Football is king in terms of talent. Now, I personally, I'll just be honest with you. Even though I make money doing this podcast, I hate to, I've lost my amateur status for the Olympics. But in a weird way, I don't care about audience sizes and ratings. I really don't. But I also know that a lot of other people do, including advertisers, including Major League Baseball. And football is a bigger sport television wise, not for me, but for the majority of Americans. And there's no college, maybe there's one or two college games, I don't really know, but Friday's not a big college football night. Saturday is, and you got pro football on Sunday. Why wouldn't you take advantage and have the four division series start on this Friday where you're not competing with football? I don't get it. I don't get it. And write your answer down here if you think you know why. You'll be wrong. But so tomorrow we have the playoffs start again tomorrow, and if I'm not mistaken, it's going to be it's one of those glorious days where you have all four of the series playing. Chicago, Milwaukee. Look, we don't know if Milwaukee, Toronto, Philadelphia, and Seattle are rusty at all. That's why I would prefer a one game. I prefer the one game playoff thing. I honestly do, because you don't have the long layover for all the other teams. But we've got it. We understand. There's no turning back. We're going to see if Milwaukee's rusty. We're going to see if of all the teams with home field advantage, I think the one with the biggest disadvantage is Toronto. I think Toronto, the Yankees were in a little bit of their head going into the ending of the series, and the Yankees are coming off the high of they were on their backs to the wall, and they played about as well as you could play. Got to give the Yankees and Boone credit. They managed and played the final two games against Boston very well, and Toronto has just been sitting around. Now, then again, the momentum was also going for Cleveland over Detroit. And how did that work out? So we will see. And I think the game one is going to be the most interesting game because we're going to see who's rusty and who's not. Peralta is going up against Boyd. Peralta is an all-star for Milwaukee. He's been sitting around. Heel is pitching against Gausman. Gausman's pitched very well this year, but he's also had some down games, and Heel pitched pretty well down the stretch too. Kirby has been a terrific pitcher for the Mariners, but not a superstar. We'll see how it does it against Melton. If the Tigers can win that first game against Seattle and then have Skubal in their back pocket, that could be really dangerous for Seattle. And, of course, Ohtani is going to be making his pitching debut in the postseason against Sanchez. And we're just going to see where the legend is going to go there. That's the game that I'm the most excited about, Los Angeles versus Philadelphia, because I want to see what the Phillies can do against Ohtani as a pitcher. But every one of these games is huge, but you have the X factor of the rust. So we will see what happens to that. There has been news, however. I know there were no games being played, but there's no shortage of news going on as the manager merry-go-round is going. And quite frankly, there's some interesting developments in terms of what managers are out. And then I'm going to have some philosophical questions about the Manager of the Year award.
Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Every day we make decisions, but on Prize Picks, being right can actually get you paid. Don't miss the excitement on this football season or the baseball playoffs with Prize Picks, where it's good to be right. Playing Prize Picks is such a fun, simple way to add more excitement to football, baseball. You just pick more than or less than on player projections like Josh Allen's passing yards or number of home runs Giancarlo Stanton's going to hit, and you're in the game. And Prize Picks just added stacks. So if you want to ride a player, you can select their pass yards, rush yards, touchdowns, home runs, all in one lineup. Obviously, you can't combine football and baseball, but you know what you mean. You can make your lineup in under a minute. And it's always fun to follow the players in the app and copy their lineups with just one click. And the new injury reboot feature, so if your player leaves early and doesn't return, it's not going to count against you. Download the PrizePicks app today and use the code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONMLB and $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right.
There's been a bunch of there's been a lot of movement in terms of managers, and some were a little surprising. Brian Snitker, who has been a baseball lifer for the Atlanta Braves, and he's been the Braves manager for almost a decade now. And I initially was skeptical of his hiring by the Braves. He was promoted from within the organization. He turned out to be a fabulous manager. He turned out to he won the Manager of the Year one year, and we're going to get to that, what that means in a little bit. But he did a fantastic job. The Braves turned around under his watch. They made it to the World Series and won it. With the absolute least likely team because they were riddled with injuries, losing record at the trade deadline, and they won that dramatic World Series against the Houston Astros, thanks to the players who cobbled together. The Jorge Solers, the Andy Rosario, the Jock Petersons were a big part of it. Freddie Freeman as well. And Max Fried was the pitching star. And they had just an absolute lockdown bullpen. And Snitker is basically retiring. He's stepping down. It's not a firing. And I have a feeling they're probably going to promote someone from within to get that to be the new manager of the Atlanta Braves. That would be an interesting hire because the Braves who had a very disappointing season this year. There's a lot of talent on that team. And sometimes you see teams have a bad year one year and rebound, and maybe a new manager, a new step, and a new direction will go a long way. One of the worst kept secrets in baseball was the fact that Skip Schumacher was next in line to be the Rangers manager. That he was the Manager of the Year in Miami when they went to the playoffs in 2023. And then Miami said, well, we made the playoffs in 2023 with a young, hungry, exciting team. We better blow that up because Miami's not a real baseball organization. And Schumacher was got the short end of the stick on that. And he left after the 2024 season. He kicked the tires of some other teams and then joined the front office where he was the vice president of Beans and Franks and Beans for the Texas Rangers. Bruce Bochy's contract is up. Bruce Bochy did his job. He came in. He was the gunslinger. He was basically Clint Eastwood and Unforgiven. That he came out of retirement, shot up the guy, shot Little Bill because Ned was outside the Skinny's saloon there. I'm going deep with my Unforgiven references today. And he did his job. The Texas Rangers are now no longer one of the teams that you say never have won a World Series. They have. And cling to those 2023 DVDs, folks, because of some of the revenue streams that are not going to be there with their television package falling apart. It looks like the Rangers are going to blow the team up. Now, Skip Schumacher going to get the short end of the stick there. But if they're smart and they wind up trading away the DeGroms and the Eovaldes and some of the other players and getting good players back, they still have some good players on the team. They probably will turn things around relatively quickly, and Skip Schumacher is clearly a fine manager. But there are other teams that have made managerial announcements. It's clear that the Angels, they had Ron Washington, baseball lifer. No one can dislike Ron Washington, but he left because of health reasons, and we haven't heard a whole hell of a lot since then, and that's always troubling. We all wish him well, but I think his managerial days are probably over. Ray Montgomery came in, was the interim manager for the rest of the year, and they did not pick up the option. Ron Washington, Ray Montgomery was there basically keep the seat warm, and boy oh boy, Artie Moreno, the owner of I guess of the Los Angeles, let's just call them the California Angels, of the Angels, they're the Los Angeles Angels. I guess they've removed the of Anaheim for a couple of years now, but it's always confusing. And there's been major issues with that ownership. But one thing that's been clear over the years is Artie Moreno will stop at nothing to win the 2011 World Series. He is obsessed with the 2011 World Series. So many players, big players from that team, have come through Anaheim. And of course, the big one, even bigger than Josh Hamilton, even bigger than David Freese, Albert Pujols. And Albert Pujols signed that contract after the 2011 World Series to play with the Angels until the heat death of the universe. And it didn't work out great on the field. He was still hit a bunch of home runs, but he was no longer Albert the Great. And however, we don't always see the stuff happening behind the scenes. And evidently, Pujols was a great influence on Mike Trout. And having a multiple MVP Hall of Famer like Pujols, and he, let's face it, he was an incredible Hall of Famer, was a positive for the development of Mike Trout. So, their players' value isn't always what's on the back of their baseball card. But now it looks like he is the prime candidate to be the new manager of the Angels. And why not? I mean, who knows? Pujols could be a great manager. He certainly is going to get the respect of the players. He's going to the Hall of Fame. Hall of Fame managers don't always make great picks, but Frank Robinson was a good manager. Paul Molitor won Manager of the Year one year. So did Ted Williams. Sometimes neither one of them, neither Williams nor Paul Molitor were long-term solutions as managers. But who knows? Pujols could be a great manager, or it could be a little more of the whack-a-mole mentality going on in Anaheim. There's some other, I mentioned Rocco Baldelli was let go by the Twins. And the Giants fired Bob Melvin. Now with Buster Posey in charge of the Giants and Bruce Bochy available, I made the case that this is once again, let's bring up Bruce Bochy's lieutenants. I think Hensley Mullins, I was about to say Hensley Mullins is one of the most insanely qualified managerial candidates who has not been a major league manager yet. I've been screaming for the top of my lungs for him for years. Same with Roberto Kelly. But I think Mullins, who has had a lot of, obviously both Roberto Kelly and Mullins have multiple World Series rings as coaches on the Bruce Bochy staff, and Mullins has managed. Roberto Kelly has managed. Mullins speaks every language of the world. Incredibly respected coach, and with Posey there understanding his value, I would think it would be a smart thing to bring Hensley Mullins in to say, okay, we're going to have a little bit of that Bochy magic, and have Mullins be the one sitting in the dugout. There are people whispering that it could be the return of Bruce Bochy, returning to San Francisco like Vladimir Lenin on the train returning back to Russia. How about that for an up-to-date reference? I would go with the long-term solution, which would be Mullins, and again, make Bruce Bochy the vice president of Beans and Franks and Franks and Beans. But it wouldn't surprise me if they brought back Bochy to essentially do what he did when he was the manager of the Rangers, which is win one quick and let's move on. Bob Melvin has a strange career. He's won multiple Manager of the Year awards. He's never won a pennant. He's gotten to the ALCS, but he's never won a pennant. Right? Not the ALCS. Yeah, he's been to the NLCS. I'm sorry, he's taken 2 teams, the NLCS, and some low budget A's teams. He can be sometimes frustrating as an in-game manager, but there's no questioning the fact that he has taken multiple teams to the playoffs, and some of those teams were dirt cheap. Now, if I were the Mets, I would kick the tires. He's a manager that if you add a World Series title to his resume, we might be talking Cooperstown, or he may not. I don't know. This is like a Buck Showalter situation. And we'll see. Rocco Baldelli was considered one of the best managers in baseball just a few years ago. Now he is available. And there's a couple other teams that have like interim managers, like the Orioles, like the Rockies, the Nationals, that they haven't announced whether or not those interim labels will be lifted. And so the Nats, the Rocks, the Orioles are probably all would be looking at some high profile candidates or people who are, could potentially make the jump from the coaching staff to the manager. Melvin's name is going to be bounced around. Probably David Ross's name, as he has a managerial experience with the Cubs. I think it's always smart to pick someone who has managed elsewhere, and so they've kind of gotten the cobwebs out. Walt Weiss's name has been bounced around as a potential one for Atlanta. He has ties to Atlanta. He's a former manager with the Rocks. Mark DeRosa's name has been bounced around as a potential managerial candidate. And we'll see what will happen with that. You have some people like George Lombard, who's a coach on the Tigers organization, on the Tigers staff. Ricky Weeks, who's a coach on the Brewers staff. Danny Lehman, who's a coach for the Dodgers staff. These are all people who have been rumored. And then you have people like Brad Ausmus, who could take a managerial job. Manny Acta, who's had managerial jobs beforehand. Don Mattingly, who's had managerial jobs beforehand and have won Manager of the Year. These are all people who could be going in this managerial, merry-go-round. Yankee fans, Aaron Boone's going to keep his job. And you know what? I'll give Aaron Boone credit. He did a really good job in the final 2 games against Boston. And if the Yankees go all the way to the World Series again, then you're going to have to give him credit where credit is due. The Mets, I would have to think long and hard about doing something. You can't fall on your face quite like that. But either way, managers are going to be spinning their wheels and figure out who's going to be where. And I just casually mentioned that the Manager of the Year has gone to several managers who are now updating their LinkedIn page. Now, Schumacher is the Rangers manager, and he did a good job with the Marlins. But you'd be surprised. The award of Manager of the Year does not necessarily mean you're going to be a long-term respected manager at one team for a while.
The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 back in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5. It hits, you unlock 300 tomatoes in bonus bets across the app. No matter how you do your betting, whether it's your parlays you build up, your player props, you do the live lines during the game, FanDuel has you covered. It makes football even more exciting because it gives you a little something riding on each game. Now, whether you're a casual fan like I am or you're just diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the football game day so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com and download the FanDuel app today and get started.
I'm going to, right now, I've gone over here and I'm going to show you I'm not going to show you, but I'll show you the Manager of the Year. Manager of the Year is given out every year. I think they should change the name of the award to Manager of the Team that you didn't expect to compete. But when you win the Manager of the Year award, I guess you're thought of as being one of the best managers in the game. Hell, you got a little trophy for it. And last year the managers were Pat Murphy and Stephen Vogt, and there's a chance both of them could win again. But let's take a look at 2023. Brandon Hyde was the manager of the Baltimore Orioles in 2023. I'm not talking about John McGraw and Connie Mack. I'm talking 2023, 2 years ago. Brandon Hyde was the manager of the year in Baltimore. Skip Schumacher was the manager of the year in Miami. Brandon Hyde is no longer the manager in Baltimore. Skip Schumacher is no longer the manager in Miami. Maybe some of the teams will be kicking the tires on Brandon Hyde. In 2022, the manager of the year were Terry Francona. Well, he's still managing for Cleveland. In 2022, Cincinnati now. He's no longer the manager, but then again, in a 3-year span, 2 different managers have won manager of the year in Cleveland. Buck Showalter was the manager of the Mets. He's no longer the manager of the Mets. This is, again, 2023 and 2022. None of the manager of the years are currently still in that position. 2021, you had Kevin Cash, and then you had Gabe Kapler. Remember, he won manager of the year? So there you go. You had 3 straight, 2023, 2022, 2021. Every year, the National League Manager of the Year, none of them are currently in their spot. Oh, go to 2020. Don Mattingly. He won the Manager of the Year with the Marlins in 2020. He's no longer the manager of the Marlins. So in the decade of the 2020s, only one Manager of the Year still has their job that they won for. Kevin Cash won a couple of them with Tampa Bay, and so he still has his. He won back to back. 2019, however, Rocco Baldelli with the Minnesota Twins. Bye-bye, you need a new job. 2019, Mike Shildt for the Cardinals. Bye-bye, out he goes. Remember, he went on a wild winning streak in 2021 to get the Cardinals into the playoffs again, and they rewarded him by firing him. Snitker was the manager of the year in 20. They had a bunch of people. Snitker retired. Torey Lovullo, Dave Roberts. Meanwhile, in the American League, Bob Melvin, Paul Molitor, Terry Francona, Jeff Bannister. So going back, 10 years, the only people who've won manager of the year who still have the same job are Stephen Vogt, Pat Murphy, Dave Roberts, Torey Lovullo, and Kevin Cash. Okay? Going back 10 years. Now, before that, you start having ones I bet you forgot. You had Joe Madden, and you have people like Jeff Bannister, Showalter winning from Baltimore, Matt Williams, Clint Hurdle for the Pirates, Francona again for Cleveland, Bob Melvin for Oakland, Joe Madden for Tampa Bay, the late Davey Johnson. You had Kirk Gibson, Bud Black, all these people who are like no longer even managing anymore. Some like Davey Johnson sadly have passed away. But the manager of the year is almost the Michael kiss of death of Fredo at this point. It doesn't mean, oh my God, we have one of the elite managers and he's going to be there for a long time. For more often than not in the National League, it was better get your resume ready. Now, I think Pat Murphy will win the manager of the year this year, and I think his job is secure. And Stephen Vogt I think Stephen Vogt will probably win manager of the year in the American League, but who knows? Well, it might be Dan Wilson. I don't know. Neither do you. But to me, it's strange that you would think the manager of the year would be to someone who is just going to be a fixture on that team. We have a lock. We got someone who is there. And just ask the managers of the year in 2023, 2022, 2021. I mean, it's just year after year. They win the manager of the year and they're done. So a lot of teams need new managers. And if you're looking to pad your resume, you could get a former manager of the year. Brandon Hyde has that on his resume. Skip Schumacher did, and the Rangers picked him up. Gabe Kapler. I mean, to me, this is all surreal. This is absolutely surreal. And Bob Melvin won the manager of the year with the A's twice, and with the Arizona Diamondbacks once, going back to 2007. I'm convinced if Bob Melvin won a pennant and a World Series title with his resume, he'd be talked about as a Cooperstown manager, because all those Manager of the Year awards and winning with low budget teams, that would be padding the proverbial resume. But I digress. Teams are going to look for for new skippers. And I'm reminded of when the great actress Shelley Winters, who's a 2-time Academy Award winner, was asked to audition and screen test for a movie. And apparently she went to the casting director with a bag, and she unzipped the bag and pulled out her first Oscar and said, "Here's my audition." And she pulled out the second Oscar and said, "And here's my screen test." I'd like to think some of these managers, when they go to interview for these many gigs that are open, whether you're Paul Molitor, whether you're Rocco Baldelli, whether you're Brandon Hyde, whether you're Gabe Kapler, you sit down, said, "So, why do you think you're ready for managing this club?" Pull out the bag and put your Manager of the Year trophy right there, because why not? Well, guess what? You're probably hearing this on Saturday. So we got 4 baseball games coming, and I can't wait to hear it. Thanks so much for making Locked On MLB your first listen every day. For your second listen, find the all-night Locked On MLB game night, every game, every night until World Series champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find MLB game night on Locked On MLB or YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcasts. And let's do the trivia question quick. We're running out of time. Who was the last Manager of the Year to win the World Series and Manager of the Year in the same year? Last time that the Manager of the Year went to the manager who won the title that year. That's the trivia question. Put your answers right down here. Talking about the day off, why that's crazy, upcoming series, and big managerial news. This has been Locked On MLB. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully.